Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good morning.
Before we call the roll, I just wanted to announce that we do have a new member. We want to welcome Mike Derenberg. Mike, thanks for being here. And all of us will help you in any way we can with any information, and hope you find the work rewarding.
Great, I appreciate that.
It's good to see you. So can we call the roll officially?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Superintendent Choudhury is absent. Secretary Churchill.
Good morning. Present.
Mr. Derenberg.
Present.
Ms. Eberhardt is here. Mr. Gibbons.
Present.
Ms. Lala.
Present.
Mr. Lombardo is absent. Secretary McCord.
Present.
And Chair Casemeyer.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do you have any revisions to the agenda, Cassandra, or any public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Bob, you want to go through the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have two parts of the consent agenda. A through E we need a vote on to adopt. In items F through H, I'll go through individually, and there are information only. Right. So A through E, Mr. Chair.
So you want to make anybody have any comments about the consent agenda? Have any questions? Do I hear a motion?
So move, Mr. Chair. Gloria Lawler.
Second?
Second, Mr. Gibbons.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then items F through H on page 43 of the agenda. St. Mary's has a utility easement. It's simply recording it publicly, and it's official. Page 46 is our Baltimore City E15 million report. That's it was a special allocation for HVAC projects. We have 3 projects still dragging, and we plan to come back next month and give a little more information, more detailed information on that. Maybe invite the LEA to also supplement us with their information.
You just want to specify what that is, so Mike may not know.
Thank you.
What that stands for.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the General Assembly and the governor appropriated $15 million a few years back to help with the HVAC problems at Baltimore City. And in your agenda, you'll find a status report that we report out so that the progress on that very important work is clear to everybody, and you can ask questions so that we can follow up if necessary. That status report, by the way, led the other status reports that you'll also see in today's agenda for projects. It's very important that we're transparent. Everybody knows what's going on. So we have three of those projects that have delayed for various reasons. Part of it has to do with the COVID and supply chain issues, but we'll give you all that information next month. On page 48, you'll find a listing of projects approaching the 2-year deadline for contract approval. The allocations by the IAC have to be under contract within 2 years or they revert. Pragmatically, what that means is that they are recycled. They go back to the LEA, the clock starts again, or we put them towards another project. It's not something we like to see. When you look at that report, you'll see a lot of reds and some yellows. And we are working hard by increasing the communication with LEAs to line projects up in a very systematically well thought, deliberate fashion so that whenever they come to us, they are fully cooked and ready to go to bid. So we hope to be reducing that, and we will reduce that backlog of projects that revert at a later date. Very importantly, first major reason we're working on that is so the work gets done to help the learning environment for children as quickly as possible. But other than that, very importantly, we have about 4.5% construction escalation every year. So every time we kick the can on these funds, it loses its purchasing power. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Brett, you want to talk about number 2?
Sure. Good morning, Chair Casemeyer and members of the commission. This item is informational and does not require IAC action. This report displays the current status of Built to Learn Act projects that have been approved by the IAC. The delivery column indicates the type of project delivery method, which is either owner builder, CMAR, which is construction manager at risk, or DBB, which is design bid build. The percentage within each box indicates the level of progress of that phase, and the color indicates to the degree to which the activities in that phase are or were on schedule based upon the LEA's initially submitted project schedule, which is generally from their schematic design submission. Blue indicates that the phase is ahead of schedule. Green indicates that the phase is within 2 months of their original schedule. Yellow indicates that the phase is within 2 to 4 months of the original schedule. Red indicates that the phase is more than 4 months behind schedule. A few highlights. Anne Arundel County, Frederick, Hartford, Howard, and Wycomico counties all have their projects continuing on schedule. Carroll and Charles counties completed their design phase on schedule, but these projects are all 6 months or more behind the original schedule for the construction stage. Carroll County ran into significant permitting delays, and Charles County chose to delay the projects until they had an executed MOU with MSA against IAC staff recommendation. To the best of our knowledge, no other LEA delayed bidding due to the MOU process with MSA. Charles County recently bid all 3 of these projects within a week against IAC staff recommendation. For best financial result, a construction bidding best practice is to space out the bid date of projects with the same bidding pool of contractors and subcontractors between 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the project size. While each project had a month to bid, which is good, it was a concurrent month, which only leaves a week or so per project without accounting for that estimator's workload already. Bidding multi-million-dollar construction projects has a large financial risk attached to it, and when estimators do not have the time that they feel is necessary to provide a complete and accurate bid, they start adding fluff and allowances to cover themselves. These mostly unnecessary costs inflate the bids and are easily avoidable when proper time between bids is provided by the LEA. The RFM team continues to monitor bid dates and provides the LEAs with recommendations and best practices. In Baltimore County, Bedford Elementary, the new Northeast Area Middle, and Pine Grove Middle all have been on the CIP for several years, and until the Built to Learn Act, they were not prioritized highly enough to receive funding. This caused those 3 projects to incur delays. Summit Park Elementary experienced a redesign when the project switched from an addition renovation project to a full replacement project. The design team and the LEA did an amazing job working together to mitigate as much as a large potential delay as possible. Construction has started in a timely fashion after that redesign effort. The design for Lansdowne High is losing steam, and the design submissions have been steadily occurring after originally scheduled. The construction start will be delayed due to the design delay and possibly delayed again due to the bidding process. However, we do not anticipate the LEA will be pushing back the opening date of the new school because we believe the project's construction duration is longer than necessary for the project. There is plenty of room in the current construction schedule to incur these design delays without an adjustment to the opening of the school being needed. We will continue to monitor this project and report back to the Commission any updates on the schedule. As a reminder, this is an informational item only, and I can now stand for any questions.
Any questions for Brett? One's Lansdowne. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I had a question for Charles County. This is Mr. Gibbons.
Yes.
For Charles County, why did they do that against your recommendation? What was the logic of doing that against your recommendation?
They wanted to get all the bids out and get them under contract. I believe that they're in a MOU negotiating process with MSA, and I believe the amounts of each individual project in the MOU have to be in the MOU. So I believe they wanted to get the projects bid as quickly as possible so that they could get those set bid amounts in the MOU with MSA.
I have a follow-up question. In the private sector right now, materials are hard to come by, particularly steel and roofs. Are we experiencing the same thing with the school construction right now?
Absolutely. Steel, roofing projects, particularly the insulation, and we're also finding anything with a computer chip in it, which is, a lot of mechanical equipment as well are experiencing long lead times.
I have a question. What's the
Mike?
projected open date for Lansdowne?
I couldn't hear your question exactly, Mike.
What's the projection open date for Lansdowne?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. Brett, do you know that?
I do not offhand, but I will
Can we,
absolutely find that
we
out.
can, yeah, we can find that out and get back to you before the end of the meeting.
Any other questions for Brett? Okay, thanks, Brett. Let's move on to item 3, Built to Learn project approvals. Arabia and Brett.
Good morning. The
Morning.
Built to Learn Act that became effective February of 2021 authorizes the Maryland Stadium Authority to issue revenue bonds and manage public school construction projects approved by this commission. Recommendations for project and budget approvals are based on IAC staff's review and analysis of project requests to ensure that school facilities are educationally sufficient and every student in Maryland is afforded a healthy and safe learning environment. This round of BTL recommendations is to approve allocations for the Green Valley and Valley Elementary School replacement projects in Frederick County. The combined total estimated maximum state share of eligible construction costs for these projects total $53 million. The projects have been approved educational specifications, reasonable cash flow schedules, and meet the criteria of project readiness. Staff are also recommending revisions to previously approved allocations for the new West County Elementary School project in Anne Arundel and J.P. Ryan Elementary Pre-K K Addition project in Charles. The original allocation requested and approved for West County inadvertently did not include an alternate for additional classrooms. After review by staff, the inclusion of the alternate was accepted by the IAC team, and the additional square footage was used to calculate the revised maximum state construction costs. Because Anne Arundel County's state share is 50% and they forward fund their projects, the adjusted gross area baseline increased from 143% to 150% above the original GAB. The increase in the state share is $994,000 more than the original project allocation approval. Higher than expected bid results are the reason IAC staff recommend amending the project allocation for the Pre-K K Addition project at J.P. Ryan Elementary School. While discussing the higher than expected project costs and a potential increase of the state's budget allocation with IAC staff, Charles County became aware that ineligible costs had been incorporated as part of their overall construction budget, and that the current allocation did not include additional eligible funding amounts such as design, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Upon weighing all options, staff recommends amending the state share for the project by including the eligible design FF&E funding to the budget. This modification to the previously approved allocation will increase the state share by $317,000. Should the IAC agree to the recommended approvals, the number of approved BTL projects will increase from 27 to 29, and total allocations based on new approvals and revisions will increase the state share of BTL funding above $725 million. The computation worksheets for these projects are included in your meeting packet. We anticipate the next round of BTL recommendations will occur within the next few months. I'm available for questions, and Brett and Fred are available as well to respond to any technical questions that you may have prior to me reading the motion.
Any questions to Arabia about her report? Okay, Arabia, what's the motion?
The motion is to approve project allocations and revisions as presented to be funded and executed through the Built to Learn Act, with new allocations estimated to total $53,513,000 and revised allocations that increase the estimated total allocations by $1,365,000. Final funding amounts are subject to adjustment based upon finalization of project worksheets and review of project eligibility.
I hear a motion. Second? Any more discussion on
Second.
the the motion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Arabia.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, on Mr. Darrenberg's previous question about the opening of Landsberg,
Lansdowne. Lansdowne.
I'm sorry,
Lansdowne.
Lansdowne. Yeah, this August of 2026.
Jeez. Bob, I wanted to ask about Mr. Gibbons' comments about the shortages that we see. Are there any strategies that we're pursuing with LEAs, discussions about strategies to meet these shortages or deal with them?
So some of them are tough to deal with right now. The industry believes that we will work through them in the next 6 to 10 months. There are strategies during the design phase, particularly if there's construction manager at risk that can give real-time information into the design process of alternative materials that might not have those delays. But that's as far as we've been able to go at this point. It's just it's a tough one. It actually was worse a few months ago. It seems to be lightening a bit.
Brett, did you have a comment?
Yes, please, Chair. For steel, they're starting, the LEAs were doing early packages, and they were including steel in the early packages to get them going for large projects, as well as roofing. And then for roofing projects that are summer roofing projects, what the LEAs have done is kind of given flexibility with the construction schedule. And that allows for the contractor to not have to rush and get something with the suppliers, and then be subject to accelerated charges from the suppliers. So that's how the LEAs have tried to mitigate those increases.
But
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you. One of the things that we have considered we have a programmatic development projects going on in the Carolinas right now. One of the things that we are considering, and I don't know whether the state is set up to do this, is to make bulk purchases of the materials that are the ones most at risk. I think Brent said it was the insulation. Is there any way that we could that the state can make bulk buys of that so it's ready? The other thing is we're having a hard time getting a specific price for it. Is there any way that the state could make bulk purchase of the type of materials that are at risk in order to give a little bit more certainty for the LEAs?
Mr. Chair, that's a really good idea. We have approved early, as Brett said, early purchase of some of the materials that we know are at risk, that by giving more time for delivery with early purchase, even before the design is complete in some cases, like steel, that we've been able to get better pricing. To be able to stack projects upon each project and between counties is not something that we have gone that far with. As I've expressed previously, the private industry are very linear. I'm sure Mr. Gibbons can attest to this in understanding what exactly that they want and having schedules that line up very well on top of each other, which is helpful to make that kind of a bulk purchase. Right now, there's more chaos in the delivery process and when projects are going to start, when the materials need to be there, than we would like to see. We have begun to work on the project pipelines that we presented before. We'll have another one coming up in a meeting or two to show statewide where we're going with projects 3 years or more in advance, so that we can begin to line up projects more, not only for the total state cash flow, but possibly for purchases like this. It's a good idea. It's one that we will pursue more, and maybe we can get back to you after we talk to some of the LEAs, and particularly, I might say, with MSA having oversight over so many LEAs at the same time, and the projects needing to be more developed whenever MSA takes them on, which we are getting better at. This opportunity might reveal itself more as we go forward, and we can report back.
Hey, Bob, what has happened with all this going on is that a lot of times we haven't had to do this, but other developers are putting temporary roofs. And so, on to get, in this case, tenants in. So this would at least give you certainty. The biggest issue is the certainty of delivery to meet your schedule. And as you always, as we always discuss, time is money for construction.
Yeah.
Because as it delays, you're getting incremental general conditions and other costs associated with it. So I think it's something that we should really, I know it's unusual, and for us, it's unusual too, but I do think it's something we should really consider.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We will do.
But I mean, there are groups amongst the LEAs. Is there a group that considers these alternatives because of the situation, Bob? Is that ongoing or not?
As I say, being able to stack these projects vertically to see where they're going to hit and where they're going to need these materials has been challenging. Brett, what you're trying to do that? What's your opinion on being able to predict what projects that we could do bulk purchases on?
I think with roofing insulation that could occur. Another thing that's happening is the suppliers are not holding their price until delivery, which is, unheard of. A lot of LEAs have voiced frustrations with that they're receiving from their general contractors and construction managers.
It's not just the LEAs, Brett. It's nationwide.
Yeah. Agreed. And some LEAs are having to do temp roofs just to keep going with the schedule. That is something that is occurring on school projects right now as well.
But on Brett's point, if we could agree that, say, we're going to use isocyanate type of insulation on our projects on top of the deck, and we can find those projects, the state would have an advantage in being able to negotiate a firm price up front for a large purchase, probably more so than individual projects. And that's my opinion.
I agree.
All I'm trying to understand, Bob, is there is an attempt or a plan, or there is a group that's undertaking these alternative possibilities because of the situation we face. That's all I want to know. It does
thank you.
Talk about these things?
Nothing formalized. All the talk that has occurred is ad hoc at this point.
Well, I think we ought to raise the issue to these people.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will do so. We'll send out a memorandum to all of the LEAs and set up a meeting so that we can begin to talk and include MSA in that meeting as well.
Okay. Linda?
My comment, not as an expert, but from what you said, is it looks like MSA, because they're overseeing all the build to learn projects, and that's a large amount of money, would be able to get help.
I think you're right.
They certainly might be able to, and because they are the source of the funding, that gives them a little more authority to be able to hold things in line.
I think you should call them and raise the issue, Bob.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, we will.
I forget, did we ever vote on Arabia's motion? All in favor of the motion made by Arabia, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 4, amendment of Prince George's FY21 and 23 CIP. Gene?
Good morning, Chair Casemeyer and members of the Commission. In late March, the IAC staff received a request from Prince George's County Public Schools to cancel the fiscal year 2021 systemic HVAC project at Charles H. Flowers High School and amend the fiscal year 2023 systemic roof project at Charles H. Flowers High School to include the HVAC scope of work. Prince George's County Public Schools indicated these projects were developed by different planning teams and resulted in the submission of 2 separate requests in different fiscal years. Once this came to the attention of Prince George's County Public Schools capital program staff, a decision was made to combine the 2 projects to allow for better project coordination and execution. IAC staff recommend approval. We can now stand for any questions or read the motion.
Why don't you read the motion first, Gene?
1, to approve the cancellation of Prince George's County Public School fiscal year 2021 Charles H. Flowers High School HVAC project. 2, transfer the state allocation totaling $4,819,000 to the LEA's reserve prior year appropriations account. 3, amend the fiscal year 2023 CIP Charles H. Flowers roof project to include the HVAC scope of work. And 4, apply $4,819,000 from the reserve prior year appropriations account to the fiscal year 2023 Charles H. Flowers HVAC/roof project.
Any questions on Gene's comments and proposed motion? Do you hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, item 5, cancellation of Frederick County Middletown High School CIP. Arabia?
Yes. So Frederick County is requesting the cancellation of the FY 2021 Capital Improvement Program roof project at Middletown High School, and that the funds be transferred to the LEA's prior year appropriations account. The decision to request the cancellation of this project was made after reevaluating the needs of the facility. And it was determined by the LEA that the school will need to be renovated or replaced within the next 10 years. The LEA will use local dollars to make the necessary roof repairs to extend the life of the building system. I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Arabia?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a comment if I could. That this is good management, and we know now with the SFA data, and we're able to understand the outcome of these strategies better. That if Frederick is taking this project, this school, and maximizing the life of all of the existing systems, and then they are going to renew or replace. And in fact, in this case, they're going to replace. That's a good strategy because it is less expensive in the long run for total cost of ownership. We know now, looking at the SFA data, that compared to their total state, their total facility portfolio-wide average age and their FCI, that they are one of the best in the state. In other words, even though they have older facilities as a whole, on average with other LEAs, their FCI is lower because this strategy is working, which reduces their costs to own, which allows them to do really good strategic management, including maintenance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Arabia, you want to repeat your motion, please?
Yes, sir. To approve the cancellation of Frederick County Public Schools Middletown High School roof project, replacement project, and transfer the state's allocation totaling $168,320 to the LEA's reserve prior year appropriations account.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Ms. Everhart, any more questions about Arabia's motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Arabia. Now, item number 6, FY 2023 Healthy Schools Schedule for Allocation Revision Procedures. Arabia and Cassandra?
Good morning again, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. The Healthy School Facility Fund began in fiscal year 2019, and it's intended to provide for projects that will improve the health of school facilities throughout the state. Today, we're recommending a few updates to the procedures for that program, as well as opening of the application period. Substantive changes to the procedures are highlighted in your backup material, and you'll see the first of these on page 64 of your agenda. When the program was implemented, there was a statutory provision that said that no LEA could receive more than $15 million. That provision has since been repealed, so this change simply brings our procedures into alignment with that statutory change. The next change is on page 67, and it clarifies that a contract is eligible for reimbursement as long as it was approved by the local Board of Education within 18 months prior to the IAC allocation approval date. This guide was silent on whether or not forward funding could occur in this program, so this really just clears up a missing piece of information for the LEAs so that they know exactly what might be eligible. On page 68, you'll see in section 26.8, just the exact reverse of the provision that I just discussed. If a contract that's approved within 18 months is eligible, then a contract approved more than 18 months ago is ineligible. And further down in section 28, you'll see that we modified the design review levels just to be consistent with updates that DGS has made to those design review level definitions. Finally, on page 83, you'll see the proposed schedule for the program. If today's motion is adopted, then we will send out a notice to all the LEAs. We will open the application period and we will receive applications for a period of time. Your staff will work to vet those projects for eligibility and make recommendations. And those recommendations would come to you at your September 8th meeting. There is currently $90 million available in funding for this program for FY23. It includes $50 million in capital funds and another $40 million in federal ARPA funding that is specifically for HVAC improvements. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions or I can read the motion.
Why don't you read the motion first, if you don't mind?
So the motion is to authorize the IAC staff to release the Healthy School Facility Fund Administrative Procedures Guide and to solicit applications from LEAs and the Maryland School for the Blind for projects that will improve the health of school facilities and to evaluate project requests based on a competitive application process. Additionally, IAC staff are authorized to make non-substantive edits to the procedures as necessary.
Thank you. Hear a motion to approve? Any motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. Any questions for Cassandra? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra. Item 7, FY23 Aging Schools Program, revisions to procedures.
So this is a similar item, Mr. Chair. We are presenting revisions to the Aging Schools Program procedures and requesting approval to solicit applications. As background, the Aging Schools Program was established in 1997. It provides $6.1 million annually to all 24 LEAs, and the allocation levels that are shown on page 84 of your agenda are statutorily mandated. In section 2 on page 87, you'll see that we're removing the language. These funds may also be used to fund window air conditioning units. That's only because it's unnecessary and it's kind of irrelevant right now. There was a period of time when window air conditioning units were being used to provide air conditioning in classrooms that desperately needed it. Now, the projects that we're seeing for HVAC are for more sophisticated cooling systems. So this does not change that eligibility per se, but just brings the procedures in alignment with the more modern interpretation of, or the more modern approaches to providing air conditioning. In section 5 on page 88, we're recommending to strike F, which states the establishment of contingency for change orders is ineligible. Again, this is just more cleanup. These procedures needed to be looked at. In House Bill 1783 in 2018 prohibits the funding of change orders by the IEC. So change orders will still be ineligible. This language just isn't necessary because the LEAs know that change orders are not permitted in any of our programs as a result of that statutory change. On page 91, you'll see the same updates to the DGS review level submission requirements as you saw in the last procedures guide. Again, that's just to bring those into alignment with the new DGS definitions. On page 92, going into 93, we're removing a whole section on ineligible expenditures just because it's redundant. We already state in section 5 that those ineligible expenditures are governed by COMAR. And in this motion, we are requesting to approve changes to the procedures guide, again, to open the application period. And this one's a little bit different because we're also requesting that you delegate authority to staff to vet the eligible projects and go ahead and issue approvals. This delegation is consistent with the IAC's prior policy of delegating to staff when the only approval that's being made is project eligibility. So in all of your programs where you are approving allocations, those all come to the IAC for a specific approval and always have. Historically, the IAC has delegated project eligibility determinations to staff when those allocations are already made, either by the IAC or in this case, because they're statutory allocations. Of course, it is completely up to you whether you want to accept that portion of the motion or not. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can read the motion or I can stand for questions.
To read the motion first.
So the motion is to approve the Aging Schools Programs Administrative Procedures Guide pending non-substantive edits by staff, to direct staff to solicit ASP projects from the LEAs with a maximum total allocation of $6.1 million in accordance with the FY23 budget, plus any available funds from prior year allocations, and to delegate authority to approve eligible projects within the total LEA allocation to IAC staff and IAC designees, with a report of project allocations submitted to the IAC periodically at regularly scheduled meetings.
Do I hear a motion we approve?
I have a question.
Okay, I just want to get the motion on the floor, Mike, and then we'll do that. Any second? Mr. Secretary.
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Derenberg.
So this is just for the aging school program where they want to eliminate window air conditioning units.
I'm sorry, Mr. Derenberg, you were a little bit muddy.
I said, is this just for the aging school program where they want to eliminate window air conditioning units, or is that all statewide funding?
It is just in this procedures guide. And again, it's not eliminating necessarily the eligibility, just the specific reference to them. Bob?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could, the
Yes.
window air conditioning units typically don't provide any outside air. They also typically require more power than is available in the old schools that need them. And what we found, and led by Baltimore City, I've bragged a number of times, vertical package units are the solution that are being used today. They provide both heating and cooling, as well as exchange of outside ventilation air. They still require the bringing electrical to those units, the same as a window air conditioning unit. But it is the method that has evolved past the window units that are typically used in a residence temporarily. And that's why nobody's asking for them. We're removing it. It's not important. They still could. Maybe there'll be something that's invented tomorrow that's called a window air conditioning unit. We'd be happy to look at it. But the language, I think, was specifically there to open the door for people to consider that. But there are better solutions that have replaced it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Everhart.
Yes, could you clarify this change order by eliminating it or prohibiting it? I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Ms. Eberhardt. In the past, the IAC had added contingency funding to each project, an amount of funding that wasn't used for any specific contract that could be used for change orders to increase the project cost if a need was identified. The NOT Commission met for several years prior to 2018, and they heard from the LEAs that the return on investment for that change order process didn't exist for them, that the change order approval process was challenging and it was time consuming, and they would prefer to have the IAC out of the change order business. The NOT Commission implemented that change in 2018 in House Bill 1783. And since then, we are prohibited from providing funding for change orders or for reviewing and approving change orders for additional participation by the state. So this change just brings these procedures in alignment with what was statutorily required as a change in the 21st Century School Facilities Act.
Thank you.
Has that 6.1 million number ever changed?
No, Mr. Chair, not to my knowledge since the 90s when it was implemented. Arabia might know better than I if there has ever been an adjustment to that.
I believe in the late 2000s, there was additional funding applied to these projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my understanding of how that allocation was calculated, Mr. Chair, and again, I have only been around for 5 years, not since the 1990s, but my understanding is that it was based upon each LEA's percentage of pre-1970 square footage.
Oh, okay. Any other questions for Cassandra on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Do we get that vote?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Item 8, FY22 non-public school aging program project approvals and allocations. Myron?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members.
Morning.
Senator James E. Ed DeGrange Non-Public Aging Schools Program provides funds for capital improvements in non-public school facilities that are at least 16 years old. This is on page 97 of the agenda. Three criteria determine the amount of the allocation. One, tuition less than the statewide average per pupil expenditure for public schools. Two, at least 20% of the students would be eligible for free or reduced price meals. Three, the school facilities has an average age of 50 years or more. The total appropriations is $3,500,000. Although the statutory maximum funding levels are $25,000 for criterion 1, $75,000 for 2, and $100,000 for 3, or for non-public placement schools, the number of eligible applications required prorating of the funding. All non-public schools are required to sign a grant assurance form when they apply for the grant. This form has a clause that requires the school to affirm that it does not discriminate according to state and federal legal guidelines. The FY 2022 grant provides funding for 203 schools in 19 jurisdictions, totaling $3,499,524. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions or read the motion.
Why don't you read the motion, please?
Yes, of course. The motion is to approve the FY 2022 Senator James E. Ed DeGrange Non-Public Aging Schools Program project allocations as presented, totaling $3,499,524.
There a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second, Ms. Law. Questions for Myron? Ms. Eberhardt?
Yes, the discrimination clause that comes in for the non-public, you said state or federal. Does that include sexual discrimination, the same as the BOOST program requires?
Yes, Ms. Everhart, I believe that is indeed the case. I know it follows both COMAR guidelines and also the Civil Rights Act and other federal legal discrimination against sexual orientation, race, gender. Yes.
Okay, okay, fine, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you, Myron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now we want to move on. Several months ago, we decided we wanted to develop some guidelines in the commission, one for some bylaws, one for an evaluation of executive director. Ms. Eberhardt volunteered to lead the work group on the development of some bylaws. Linda, do you want to start the discussion?
Thank you. Several months ago, you can't say no to Senator Casemeyer. So 4 of us have been working for the past few months with the help of Heidi, the Assistant Attorney General, and Cassandra for their help. And you have a draft of the bylaws. These bylaws incorporate everything that we've been doing as a commission based on what the statute says that the IAC it requires to do. The only section that you will see that is something that we have not been doing is to elect a vice chair. So it incorporates language about to elect a vice chair and how that happens. All the other things are similar to what other commissions have in their bylaw. So I would like you to take this next month, if you would, to look at and read the bylaws, and that if you have questions or suggestions, send them to us, and that we'll address them and hopefully have a vote at the May meeting to approve these bylaws.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for all your work. And Heidi and Cassandra. Does everyone have the bylaws? Okay, so we'll try, unless there's some problems, to have a final vote in May. Okay? Okay, Heidi, legislative update.
Good morning, Commission members, Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
Well, the 2022 regular session of the Maryland General Assembly concluded on Monday. They passed a number of bills, some of which do affect the commission, and I'll just briefly go over the larger ones. The first bill is House Bill 1290. This is the bill we talked about, I believe, at our March meeting. It is the bill that implements the recommendations of the work group on assessment and funding of school facilities. This was chaired by Delegate McIntosh, this work group. At the May IAC meeting, Cassandra will be presenting more detailed information about this bill and how the bill's provisions will be implemented into practice for the IAC. But just very briefly, we discussed at our March meeting 3 amendments that the IAC was looking for, specific amendments. The first one was there was formally a requirement in the bill that the IAC had to conduct extensive kind of boots on the ground physical inspections of a number of systems or a number of items that really the LEAs currently collect data for. So the bill was changed to allow, instead of the physical inspection, the IAC will still do physical inspections, but they just won't have to gather this very, very in-depth data. The LEAs will be able to submit their data for the statewide facility assessment database. The second amendment was increasing from 100% to 120% the expected useful life percentage for a school with an adequate assessment rating in order for that school to receive an increase of 5% in the state share. There were a number of targeted increases in the state share, and we just wanted to make sure that when it was 100%, and Bob or Cassandra can correct me if I'm wrong, most of the schools in the state could potentially qualify, so that increase really wouldn't be very meaningful. And the third amendment that the IAC recommended, and which was accepted by the bill sponsor, was to alter the adjacency requirement. Originally in the bill, the adjacency requirement was that the available seat count in a single adjacent school had to equal 15% or more of that adjacent school's enrollment. The IAC recommended that instead it would be the sum of all adjacent schools. The available seat count in all of the adjacent schools would equal 15% or more of the project school's enrollment. That just made more sense, just because of how things are done. So that's HB 1290. I don't know if there are any questions on that one. Again, Cassandra will be going over that a little bit in more detail in May, at the May meeting. There were also some additional bills that kind of fell into 2 buckets. There was the environmental bucket. The bills that did not pass that we discussed at the last meeting were House Bill 365, Delegate Corman's bill, that would have prevented in all new school construction and renovations the use of fossil fuel-based energy systems. That did not pass, as well as Senator Heddleman's bill that would have redefined what a major renovation is, by saying that included the replacement of any electrical, plumbing, or HVAC system, and that would have triggered the requirement that those buildings be brought up to high performance green building standards. So that did not pass. But what did pass is the Climate Solutions Now Act of 22. This is Senator Pinsky's bill. This was enacted without the governor's signature. It was heavily amended. The bill, as it applies to the IAC, as it passed, just increases the state share of the eligible school construction project costs by 5 percentage points for schools that are built as net zero schools. I don't know if there were any questions on the environmental bills that passed and did not pass. Okay, so the second bucket was prevailing wage. Delegate Kittleman had introduced a prevailing wage bill that would have created a moratorium for public school construction on the requirement for prevailing wage. That did not pass, but the prevailing wage bill that did pass was House Bill 611 and Senate Bill 259. The governor did veto this bill. The veto was overridden by the General Assembly. There were no amendments. And the bill makes mechanical system service contracts exceeding $2,500 subject to the state prevailing wage law. That includes HVAC, refrigeration, plumbing, electrical, and elevators. My understanding is that the LEAs will either pay the prevailing wage or they'll choose to pay for these service contracts locally so that they won't be subject to the prevailing wage requirement. Okay, and just a couple of other bills. There was a bill that currently the IAC and the Stadium Authority have agreed that for the Built to Learn Act funding, the projects that are eligible are projects that have a minimum cost of $4 million. This bill did not pass. So that $4 million floor will still apply for Built to Learn Act projects. There was a bill that was introduced by Delegate Solomon that did pass. This was the Safe Walk to School Act. It mandates that local boards seeking state fund for school construction have to submit a pedestrian safety plan to the IAC for approval. It used to be for review. And it provides that the county board, not the IAC, makes all determinations about the contents of those pedestrian safety plans. And finally, and this is for the chair, there is this bill passed. There is a work group to study P3 viability for Charles County, similar to the P3 that's passed for Prince George's County. That work group does include the chair of the IAC as a member, and the final report of that work group is due at the end of December of this year. The chair can appoint a designee, so typically a staff member.
Thank you.
Those are all the major pieces of legislation that passed that affect the IAC. There are some smaller things that relate to environmental impacts, but these are the big ones.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Heidi. Any questions? Thank you, Heidi. It's very useful. Appreciate it. Okay, a couple of miscellaneous issues about legislative action and some other internal affairs. Cassandra, you want to talk about the capital budget a little bit, what they did in the capital budget?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So most of the capital budget was as expected, and I will brief the members on each of our standard programs and how much we receive next month. But there was one provision that was added toward the end of session that did catch us off guard. It was an additional $237 million that was earmarked for certain counties for school construction. Those include Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Charles, Frederick, Howard, and Prince George's, plus a $2 million allocation for the IAC to administer to any of the other counties that weren't named. So there's $2 million that the IAC can allocate to the other 19 counties. And there were a few interesting provisions on this funding that I just want to talk about specifically. First, this funding has 100% state share. So the state local cost share that we typically apply to our projects does not apply. Second, these projects are selected by the county and not by the Board of Education. That's very unique in our programs. It's not something that we have seen before. And I think there is some question that we're trying to work through with our Assistant Attorney General and DLS staff about which of our regulations would apply to this funding, if any. So that is still a question I'll be able to report more out at a future meeting.
So what's our role in this use of this money?
So the IAC does have to allocate this funding in accordance with the earmarks that are in statute. And we do have to develop a process for allocating the $2 million that goes to the 19 counties that aren't named.
Bob?
Mr. Chair, that's going to be next to impossible on the $2 million to do that in an equitable way. Something that comes to mind, we can talk more about it at the next meeting. I would suggest we maybe just do something simple like a lottery and let everybody draw from the hat. The first one gets $1 million, the second one gets $600,000, the third one gets $400,000, okay. And then they could use it as they would. But we've got to think through all this, and we'll have more to talk about next time. Thank you.
So what's our role in this spending of this $237 million? Just paying the bills?
we have to figure this out as far as the accountability of the expenditures. So there's a lot of details we have to work through. And of course, to the educators, which projects get picked is going to be something that we will try to facilitate communication between the counties and the boards of education. I wish we had the statewide facility assessment and a ranked list that could point to the most sensible projects, in my opinion, the highest need projects, but we'll possibly be able to point them to that information that they can gather to help them make decisions. We just don't know the answer.
In terms of the approval of the construction processes and dotting all the I's and crossing the T's, are we still involved in the same fashion with the expenditure of this money?
Mr. Chair, we don't know the answer. It doesn't look like it. It looks like we're a pass-through for the funds.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to. Okay. Any questions about that issue from anybody?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Secretary Churchill.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I do have a question on this topic, and it goes to Bob and the staff. It was the approach to just move on to the next item that's on an LEA's priority list, or is this going to be an outside list of projects that are going to be up for consideration?
Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. There's a specific provision that this funding has to be for a project that has not received funding through any of the IAC's programs in fiscal 23 or before. So these have to be new projects. They could be projects that are currently on their CIP list that aren't funded, but they don't necessarily have to be. And I don't know that every LEA even has sufficient projects on their list to achieve that. So we will have to work with each LEA to figure out, and I'm sorry, I should say we will have to work with each county to figure out what projects they want to select for this program.
And as a follow-up, are the funds that are included in this year's or FY23 budget a one-time occurrence? Or is this looking like a program that would be added on a yearly basis in future sessions?
This funding specifically that I'm talking about, this 237 million, looks like it is on a one-time basis. It's only in the budget. It's not in any other budget bill or any other statute that we have seen.
So that goes back to Bob's point about how to be very fair about this, since this is a one-time allocation of funds. And the time frame to utilize the funds are the same as any other dollars that are coming out of the CIP?
That is my understanding at this time, Mr. Chair and Secretary Churchill.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Very, very interesting. Ms. Eberhardt.
Yes, and not specifically about this bill, but in capital budget, the amount of money for school construction increase for the CIP programs?
Yes, Madam Chair. So for the capital improvement program on its own, we typically see $280 million. This year we saw 285. An interesting change is that a large portion of that money this year was PAYGO, which we haven't traditionally seen. You'll hear in May that that's actually going to allow us to reimburse some projects that Prince George's County specifically had done years ago that had passed the point where they could be reimbursed with bond funding. So we'll get to clear the decks a little bit with that additional funding. There was also a larger amount than mandated in the enrollment growth and relocatable classroom funding program. And in some of the other IAC programs, I would be happy to do a full briefing on the budget at the May meeting so that you all can see each program, what was requested, what was actually received, and how that funding will be implemented throughout the year.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob, you want to talk about your meeting with MACO? And we're trying to reach out to entities to let them know what we're doing, and we want to be cooperative and help jurisdictions, what we've been doing along that line.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We were, Cassandra and I were invited over to the Eastern Superintendents Association. And it was a very good meeting. And what a very big takeaway was that the superintendents weren't fully aware of how our programs worked and what their opportunities might be. There's a disconnect between their staff, the planners, who we normally communicate with, and themselves. And these are their words, not ours. And they suggested that we consider regional meetings, like the eastern counties, and invite the county people and their planners, invite the superintendents and their planners and us, so that we all sit around together and talk about pluses and minuses, who's doing what, and really get to know each other and understand the pros and cons of project development, prioritization, the importance of knowing where money is, when it's coming, and this communication gaps. Try to find ways to close those so that we can become more diligent and deliberate in how that we're delivering educational facilities. So we're going to do that. And we will probably end up with 4 regional meetings throughout the state this coming year. The other opportunity that came up was at MACO, where Alex and I were invited to speak. Unfortunately, everything ran over by about an hour. They were behind, and so the 15 minutes that we were allocated turned into about 3. But before the meeting, we got to visit with President Ferguson, and we had a meeting prior with him. He had questions about the statewide facilities assessment and its use, and asked a lot of good questions. Alex may want to provide more information with Dr. Sharfstein, who had provided data that really questioned how that the statewide facilities assessment would work, and we had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Sharfstein again, that Alex will tell us more on, and realized that he didn't have a good understanding of school facilities, how it works, and how he was viewing the data. And with our communication, we realized that there really wasn't anything wrong with the data. How that we use it is something that we're still talking about, which is good. But he asked how that conversation was going, because he was relying on that kind of collaboration and agreement to move forward the priority fund. Like, for instance, this $237 million maybe could be used for the priority fund in future years and address the highest need projects, which takes all the politics out. And so he's keenly interested in this and very smart. I'm talking President Ferguson, to ask these questions. And he was very happy with our reporting back to him about what we had talked about and how things were going. And I can provide more information on that later if you like. We went into the MACO meeting. And again, we had just a very short period of time. So really just to hit the tops of the trees, I was able to report to them that the statewide facilities assessment was essentially complete. We have a baseline that no one has provided any information of data not being correct. This is the base data from the assessment. The LEAs have had opportunity. Dr. Sharfstein and others have had opportunity to turn the rocks over and try to find where things are wrong. And that's a good thing. That we had run using this database. We've run preliminary what ifs, which is what we intended to do, so that the work group could study that information. The work group never was able to really get into it because of really some of the delays we had in getting them the information they needed. But the bottom line is we're ready. The system is ready to go. We can plug in different weights and produce different results. And so that vetting process can begin actually with you all, with the commission, to begin to do what ifs on the weightings of the how we use the data and the results and the highest need schools, whether a highest need school is life safety and health type issues, or whether a highest need school would be something related to growth or some mix between. And again, we can provide more information on that as you go. They were all nodding their heads and happy to hear that. And Alex and I had several really productive conversations after with county people that are hungry for good data and good information to base their expenditures from their counties on, that they can rely on in a pipeline, that they can see where these projects are coming years in advance and plan for them and work with the LEA. So overall, it was good, time well spent.
So I think it's fair to say, Bob, that we we're in a little bit different place than the legislature in terms of we feel our system is good and the information's good. And the reason we're talking to Dr. Sharfstein about this system is that President Ferguson, Chairman McIntosh both wanted us to talk and consult with Dr. Sharfstein about the system. And he is sort of their unofficial advisor. And we believe if we can have beneficial communications with Dr. Sharfstein and show him our system does work, then shortly thereafter, the legislature will really buy into our system. So Alex has been talking with Dr. Sharfstein. Maybe he wants to talk about those conversations briefly.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, all. Late last year, Dr. Sharfstein and his group from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health requested a copy of the statewide facility assessment data baseline set. And in February of this year, they connected with us to discuss the SFA data and the methodologies. And since then, we've had a number of meetings with Dr. Sharfstein's group and shared the final baseline data set with them and brought them up to speed on how it works and why. And they provided some great input and feedback that I think really confirms the solidity and the utility of the SFA data. And we're actually very excited to continue this dialogue this coming week with another meeting with Dr. Sharfstein as we reach out. I mean, we're all reaching for the same outcome, which is an educationally sufficient learning environment for every public school student in Maryland, and having their expert eyes on the data with us and helping make that, deeper outreach and connections with all the stakeholders, is a great thing. And so we appreciate their effort and time and talking with us on all of this and looking forward to continuing that.
Thanks, Alex. Before we wind up, does anyone have any questions, thoughts, statements they want to make? Okay. Bob has one final announcement.
I do. Thank you. And it's with a heavy heart that I have decided to resign from state service effective the end of May. I hope through all of our dealings and this agency's work that you can see that this is, while I might have a vision and had a pretty good idea of how to reinvent this agency so that it could provide the transparency and honesty of and effectiveness of delivering funds to the highest need. And we developed a mission statement that we want healthy, safe, and educationally sufficient schools for every child in every seat in Maryland. And everything we do, we weigh against that. But it's not been about me. As you can see, it's about my staff. We have an incredibly honest and capable expert staff in every area that continue to grow, and they have phenomenal ownership of their fields and how that they can improve schools and for the benefit of all society. So I feel comfortable with this decision. Every day of my last 40 plus years in public service has been growing in fulfillment. In the last 5 years here with Maryland have been just the peak. But while my fulfillment has grown, so has my family. So I have family in Texas and New Mexico and grandchildren and that. And I just turned 70 last week, and it's really time for me to devote and look elsewhere besides my work life for fulfillment. And I think, and also to share with my family and help us all grow in different ways, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Your announcements come as a big surprise, and you've just done a fantastic job. And next month, when we have time to prepare a better farewell, we'll be able to express it in a better way. But suffice it to say right now, we want to thank you for your incredible contribution to Maryland.
I thank you for that. I thank you for the privilege. Thank you.
We'll talk next month. Do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second. Take care, everybody, and have a good holiday this week, and see you next month. Bye-bye.
See you all next month. Bye-bye.
See you next month.